like a predator glancing at its sleeping prey. He maintained his composure and carried an air of command at all times. But his instincts were starting to get the best of him if people were producing toys like this. One of their AK-47s was gripped by his lanky hands. Even when it was at rest, the icy metal prickled his flesh and bit him. He should have heeded his initial warning about the thing's actual nature at that moment. Small, ordinary aliens were the two smugglers. Do not squat. More must be on the way if they are producing such toys. They seem to be small, insignificant things. Could you tell me if these humans are simple? The two of them exchanged puzzled looks before shrugging and responding in unison. I don't know. Eeks was an agent sent by his race to investigate human capabilities before invading. He snorted nervously, as if his mind were about to explode from excitement. After all, he was holding a gun to his otherwise muscular, torpedo-shaped body, which seemed out of place in comparison. He shook his head and smiled, seemingly oblivious to the restlessness of the two. How does it kill metal? The other person emphasized each word, clearly enjoying their meaning. It wasn't a question to him, but rather a sign of exasperation at how long the deal was taking. It was all just a game to him, a rhetorical device to enjoy himself. He started walking around with an air of superiority, speaking as if his listeners should feel honored to hear him. Humanity, the apes of Earth, were feared across the stars for reasons beyond my comprehension. These small creatures had been hiding behind advanced pebble throwers and glorified slingshots all this time. Oh no, that's wrong. We can't let them continue like that, can we? The two stared at him without responding, but he didn't care. Nah, we can't. We need to do something. It's our duty to save humanity from its horrible fate. At that moment, Eeks, gripping a lifeless AK-47, decided his people's fate. Unknowingly, he penned a tragic history and unleashed a pack of war dogs to charge over a hill he hadn't even seen yet. Oh no, what a bunch of doomed creatures! HES blinked, shaking his head in disapproval. The creatures seemed quite distressed. What do you think? Touch so what you want, by now. As they sprung out of their cramped seats, the two stumpy legs and thick torsos shrank them even more under the influence of EES. Looking straight ahead would have allowed him to easily miss the two. Indeed, each phrase was like dropping a dime on the destitute. He raised an eyebrow and seemed to think about their offer, as if he had ever thought about it before. Once he'd had enough practice, he scowled and let the pistol fall to the floor, its icy bounce betraying his real motive. Sneering, he let his actual purpose be known by letting the pistol fall to the floor. Retain the rubbish, he was stating. He strode away, his needle legs protruding like flags into the newly dug ground, claiming territory with each stride and blow. You bastards clenched and clenched their fists at him. You touched him, and you know what that means. He and his people were dubbed egots by everyone who had the misfortune to know them. EES had long since cast aside the references to the two creatures by the time he boarded his ship. A lion doesn't care about what other people think, and an egot doesn't care about anything beyond itself. Her crown was small and curved across the top of her oval head, and it was silvery like a fading star. Standing tall on her pedestal, she assumed the pride of her ambitious race, a pride that was wider than any galaxy. I don't want your theatrics, EAS, then simply I will be, she said, her bowing and waving his large arm before her. Encompass her bridger of cosmic distance, the egots were nothing if not pompous, and their leader naturally needed to represent such ideals, and egot was proud to pour praise onto their leaders as they prayed to be slaughtered. The news of humanity was brought to the quiet audience by a select few who had been chosen to witness the expansive One-Hold War Council during such a holy ceremony. A comet arced above a grand and blue star, and the celestial bodies roared in the silence of space, slightly distorted by the transparent shield that allowed the egots to enjoy their pump. How are you sure in reality that what you're hearing is true? The words and stories you're hearing are just lies and fairy tales, crafted to frighten. Like everyone else, he had heard the same stories. He had only seen one weapon, a small piece of war, but that was enough for him. That's all egots ever needed, an excuse to rally their pride even higher. As commanders, we are unmistakable, and humans are creatures of dirt meant to be stomped. No more words were spoken, and no noise came about the crowd of tall, slender creatures. However, to the trained ear of an egot, a standing ovation adorned the podium. It was a holy day above the pulsing star, and their leader had nodded, a simple, elegant nod, but beneath its austerity hung the signal to unleash the metal ships of war, with their weapons of conquest ready to devour more land. The impending religious splendor was a sign that humans, after all, were just apes, creatures of dirt. This much was true and self-evident, and any miscalculations could have been caused by the instinct of. From the holy skies came blades that broke the silence of those who dared to be ignorant and maintain a position of power. EES was honored to captain the conquest, and his voice had never been bigger or prouder. Before we dismantle this little transit platform, I'd want to have a word with them. The ships have been transformed into enormous metal daggers by the egotists. As they transformed over the vastness of Earth's sky, they sucked light into a silver, heartless hole. From the sacred sky sprung these swords. An embassy of humans, little and looking unkempt, waited on the plat below while four more, including Kenning Ekis, sprouted from their flying monolith. With hardly a pebble roused, the ship descended to the sea as delicately as a feather. At last, he climbed down a stairway that had slipped out of the vehicle while raising his chin high. The three people dressed in camouflage received barely a sidelong look from him when he did this. The guys were in their mid-30s, and they wore field military uniforms from head to toe. They were also dirty and bearded. It was at last possible to observe the apes. They were camouflaged from head to toe and outfitted in field military uniforms. In a moment of surprise that matched his aura of indifference, a large, dark-skinned man abruptly raised his hand as if to signal for Eeks to stop walking. Eeks, taken aback by the command as well as his own admiration for the man, paused his stride. He observed the strange hum as the man, seemingly unconcerned with his actions, placed a leg on a small crate, removed a tightly rolled cigar, and, with remarkable precision, struck a match to light it, protecting the flame from the harsh, dry wind. He then looked up at Eeks, having to pull his gaze quite high to look at his face as he idly puffs on his cigar. There was complete silence. Eeks expected more, but the man continued to smoke, clearly content. Neither of his comrades paid him any attention. Eeks shook his head, his sneer visible. What on earth is going on? James finally spoke up, his voice both calm and energetic. All right, he said, now it's your turn, buddy. I know what an introduction is. Eeks shook his head and wiped the dust off his hands, but James shrugged and continued to act casually. Ekis was growing increasingly uncomfortable with their lack of seriousness, so he nodded to maintain his composure. By now, you should know your situation. We've studied your people and weapons. James seemed to come to life out of nowhere. In a flurry of activity, he brandished an AK-47 from behind, grinning maniacally. You've never seen anything like this before, he said, gesturing toward the man on his left. Jenkins, I warned you those dweebs were trying to sell that, __, that's $20. Eckes shook his head in disapproval. James, with his cigar leaned against his knee and a smile on his face, puffed on it. Old Jenkins, who had filmed the two thieves stealing the goods, shrugged and asked, "What am I supposed to think? I'm not some stupid, __, anyhow." James rolled his hand in his apology. "You were just going on about how you were about to try and conquer us and all that." "Yes, I was," but he stepped back in what seemed like a jab, the first flying strike. In the heat of battle, Eek's anger boiled over, and he spat out his next few sentences. "We are the great claimers of the galaxy. We never fail. You should be bending over backwards to bow to me right now." "That's not how we do things around here," James said, his jaw clenched. Eek stood up straight, stretching out his shoulders and neck, and he continued, "Educating unruly children. Our people are the great claimers of the galaxy. We do not try. There is never a try with us. We always do that." He tilted his head in curiosity. "Yes." James's gaze became suddenly serious, his whole body locked into something terrifying. Beyond his simple self, he spoke with immense weight and passion. The words struck, sending a shiver down his spine and rocking him. "No, buddy, we worship something quite grand. We're just plain old folks here. No praising jazz, no bowing, no worshipping." There was an air of coolness in his delivery, so elegant, so fast, so simple, that should have served as a warning to depart. Eeks blinked and shook his head, returning to his impatience. "You do realize that our purpose is to eliminate you all?" "Yes." Even Jenkins caught on to that. Eeks scowled. "I'm only speaking to you so that I can see the realization in your eyes." James leaped to his feet, his energy and speed surprising Eeks. "Tell you the truth, buddy." Unexpectedly, he and his crew reversed course and began to make their way into the desert, their every step exuding an air of carefree laziness. James, with his back to us, raised a departing hand as if to say, "Just let us know when this here shindig begins." Eckes was taken aback by the whole encounter. "What about shaking hands beforehand?" "I'm confused. I suppose it doesn't matter. The anticipation is palpable among us. I can't remember the last time I had a genuine rumble and tumble, and you managed to get everyone pumped up about it." A sense of shame washed over him as he abruptly stood up and yelled out to the humans, "This is your people's last moments. Let it be known that what is about to happen will be tragic, horrible, and it will be us, the conquerors, the claimers, that did it." James's voice, which had been distant and was now fading behind the wind like his body, echoed through the air. Eeks, enraged by these ignorant beasts, sprinted back into his transport, his voice echoing through the empty air, while the OTS remained silent and worried. As soon as he returned to the ship, he stormed into the command room and yelled out his orders in such a way that no one dared to question him. "Send it all," he yelled. "Send the soldiers. Send the ships. I want this place glassed. I want it leveled. Kill every living thing in sight." With that, the war machine came to life, and thousands of transport ships escorted millions of egots onto the unusually silent Earth. Great drilling lasers erupted from the large knives. As a barrage of cold energy weapons unleashed their destructive power, Eeks once again climbed out of his ship and positioned himself on a protected floating platform to survey the destruction below. As the egots wreaked havoc, he could see that they were targeting desolate barren towers, with no signs of life whatsoever. Keys clenched his grip on his observer, glued to the monitors and reports, and he couldn't help but wonder, where were the humans? Screaming out in terror, he wondered if the rats had taken refuge beneath his ship. Slight shimmering appeared about 200 yards ahead of a charging line concealed by dense foliage. Under the sun's rays, it seemed like a reflection. As he pointed at them, Eeks let out a piercing scream. A group of guys hurried forward to have a look, and Eckel personally used a camera to focus in on the person hiding there. As his scream gradually drew inward, he grinned. Eventually, it resembled one of those metal slingshots, or whatever they called it. It was a pistol. A blazing inferno engulfed the muzzle, and from every direction along the forest line, hundreds of thousands more erupted. When the first Egot took a gunshot to the body and survived, Egot recognized the folly of man's weapons. Despite their speed and intensity, OT weapons were energy guns. Their level of sophistication was astounding, and the moment they came into touch with anything organic, they promptly sapped its vitality. Nothing out of the ordinary, no scars, simply life and death. It was the one correct method of combat, and it was also very graceful and delicate. The sky became a brilliant shade of crimson from the barrage of missiles, grenades, artillery, and lead as the thunder of fire resounded on the horizon. Eeks, perched on the observation deck of his ship, beheld a grisly spectacle of unorganized, haughty, marching Egots engaged in a horrific display of war and death. What was worse was that the carnage wasn't limited to just one side. Hordes of human beings were also succumbing to the onslaught, but they remained unfazed. In the midst of their insanity, an explosion rocked Aka's ship, sending him tumbling to earth in a dizzying, twisted crash. He was covered in dirt from head to toe, coated in a mixture of brown sticky earth and his own purple blood. His ears rang, and he swayed as he struggled to stand. At last, he raised his head to look at the Earth's horizon, and there it was. Suddenly, he was in the true viewpoint. There were whizzing and screeching aircraft, jets and missiles, screaming men, popping and exploding explosions from all directions, and he was in the middle of it all, amid the horror show, the terror of man, and their crude weapons. Because they were all so backwards, he couldn't make sense of it or understand what had happened. The Earth, their bodies, and their weapons. How on earth is this taking place? While he was in the midst of it, his communicator buzzed. He started to walk among the dirt among the corpses and chaos in between the flying dead, his voice drowned out by the ruthless death raging around him. He watched as one of their grand ships, the pride of his people, went down in a fiery explosion miles away. He heard the worried voice of the expansive EAS, who was furious over the constant reports of disaster. Great one, that's the problem. He couldn't help but think of James and his two carefree casual friends. He should have seen it in their eyes, the way they walked and talked. It's not the simplicity, it's all basic, all of it is trivial technology. A couple of dozen yards ahead, he saw 3 humans, Al, Light, and Furious, each with a gun. Their eyes were just as intense and energetic as their guns, and they screamed in unison, creating a powerful image. The Egots made sure to let the expansive one know whenever anything mentioned humanity or their weapons, stating that metal slingshots and bombs are not their forte. The last thing the expansive one heard was the fiery cackle of a failed invasion force, which no Egot dared to approach within light years of humans after that. The speaker was speaking slowly and quietly, but that wasn't the point. What was horrifying was the passion behind his words. Genuine weapons aren't their strength or capability, but rather their mindset, a relentless, all-or-nothing, do-or-die mentality, a relentless, all-or-nothing, do-or-die mentality, a fiery, frenzied passion, the ability to feel the sun behind their eyes, a broken roar in their lungs, the ability to witness devastation and horror, the desire to find meaning and purpose, the ability to transform death into new life, to take a final stand, to continue, and so on. Humanity's use of stupid weapons. Egots have discovered the hard way that being human is their greatest asset, but that humanity itself is their power, not their real power.